to the 100th episode. Okay, maybe it's not such a big deal to anyone, and especially if you've been podcasting for years, it's like, oh, well, wait till you get to 1,000th episode or something. Well, I'm going to celebrate it anyway. It's quite early, so if I'm croaking a little bit, it's a bit of an early start. So anyway, so 100 episodes of me rambling in your ears. How did you put up with this? If anybody even is listening, um, and obviously, why all the unicorns? Well, there's a simple answer to that. Unicorns are magical. No, they really are, aren't they? But it goes back to, I think, if you're a proper developer, a software developer, um, there's been for a long time. Look it up anyway on search, where you have a rubber duck, basically, where you talk to a rubber duck to work through your problems of your code, or maybe your own live problems. Who knows? But anyway, the idea is for developers, it's like talking it through, and it's almost like because you're explaining it to someone or something in this case, then you can probably get the find the solution. So because I'm not a proper developer, I've got a unicorn because I need all the magic I can muster. So maybe that's where it comes from, and maybe I don't know if people subscribe, I'll get, I don't know, a Ulysees unicorn, because Ulysses is the unicorn I use. Maybe I'll get a mug or a T-shirt, or even a plushie, like a unicorn plushie, which, let's face it, will be the cheapest first option off Amazon if that is the case. But anyway, enough of unicorns. This is a ramble. It isn't a weekend. I actually meant to record it at the weekend, but it's a very early start midweek of when I'm recording this. Um, so there we go. It's a ramble. It's 100th episode. Um, Realistically, I was going to go through all the episodes or briefly, and I think I started doing it, and I got up to like 20 minutes, and I'd only explained about 10 episodes. But anyway, very quickly, I've covered things like Azure functions back in the day. These are not groundbreaking, news headlines or anything like that. A lot of this stuff has been out for a long time. Azure functions still going strong. I covered things like Jamstack, which is your JavaScript front end, JavaScript back end, all sorts of things like that. gRPC, .NET MAUI, because when I covered that, this goes back to about 2020, I think, or 2019 actually, when I first put the first episode together. But anyway, yeah, covered quite a lot of little topics, and of course, because they're meant to be 5 minutes, and they never are, obviously, you don't get a lot of detail. But honestly, I ended up doing this. I think I got a bit of spurring on by my partner and my good friend Tim Abel, actually, to keep a little bit of consistency. And now I'm attempting to do YouTube videos, just 15 years late. But anyway, never mind. But yeah, the idea was, it was really to give me a bit of a reminder, really. And even though I'm waffling on a podcast, there's a few things that have come across or been suggested that could be quite interesting. So yeah, there's a few things in there. I'm going to have to revisit a few options. Serverless databases, my goodness. Episode 10. There is, obviously, there's a server. It's like serverless functions, but it's where, I moved from a basic Azure SQL Server to I think it was one of the first versions where they had the serverless Azure SQL. So the idea is, instead of you paying for a SQL Server for a whole month doing nothing, which, let's face it, that's what usually happens, the serverless option lets you create the database, but that's it. You just look after that database. And when I say look after it, it's putting data in, getting data out. You don't look after any sort of SQL Server aspect. And the beauty of it is with those sorts of things, a bit like the Azure Functions or Lambda on AWS or many others, is that you only pay when it's getting used. So with serverless databases, you do pay. It's a minuscule amount on Azure anyway, for the storage. So I've got a serverless SQL database on Azure. It costs, I think, a penny or a cent if you want to go US dollars, but it's nothing because my database isn't really that large. It's less than a gig, for development testing and all that sort of stuff. But the idea is you only then get charged, and even that, I think there's a free tier, or there was a free tier, and it was a great option, and it is a great option. It's still there, to work with databases, but not pay for when you're not using it. Ironically, there is actually, just trying to think actually. There was another episode, a fairly recent-ish one, but I've forgotten where it is. I think it was. I'm just scanning through. It's got to be there somewhere. Yeah, there's a free version of Azure SQL now. Oh, there we go, episode 91. Yeah, where they'll give you like 750 hours, which is technically a month, of an Azure database, which is actually, I can't remember now. Actually, I'm going to have to revisit it, but it's something like 10 gig or something. It's a fairly sizable SQL server that you can actually use. And in the mix of all of that, there is also a data access builder, which, for databases, not just Azure stuff. It's for Postgres, where essentially you can expose your database, to have a REST API, a GraphQL API with all the security that you can log in. So you don't just expose the whole database. You can actually specifically say these columns of that table or all of that table or whatever, but it handles security. It's got like JSON Web Token security, bearer token stuff, and that was quite interesting too. So there we go. But yeah, there's been a lot of those. Twilio, yeah, the communications platform. I've been doing a little bit more with Twilio recently because they've got like a Twilio studio where you can build visually, like a drag and drop sort of thing, of if you've got you can rent a number and all those sorts of things. So you can respond to things like if you get a WhatsApp or a text, you can do something with that. Go and look at some data, fire an API, pull back data and respond and all that sort of stuff. But Twilio, like everyone, and I did a big thing about AI agents, agentic systems, and there's quite a big thing about that because it's more, like I've mentioned before, it's more than just chatbots on your website, which, to be honest, have been a bit dumb in the past. But with the advent of ChatGPT, large language models, and all of those sorts of wonderful things, you can get essentially AI agents to work either in parallel or in sequence, work towards a goal, do all these things, but they can call out to use tools, functions, basically talk to other systems, to pull back a cohesive sort of system. And if you look at ChatGPT, whatever it was, the latest one, where it rationalizes things and tries to think things through, then ultimately that's what the AI agents are doing. And I did a podcast just a couple of weeks ago. Again, a lot of hype with this stuff, but there's a lot of newsworthy stuff about 2025 becoming the year of AI agents, and I think it is. I think there's a lot of interesting things that you can do. In fact, I'm working on something at the moment just to work with the company I work for in my day job, Codeless Platforms. we've got a product called BPA, which is an automation middleware integration uh, platform. So, but I'm looking at building some of these AI agents in to be able to present like an intelligent dashboard that you're not or not a dashboard, sorry, a portal. So the idea is, instead of having a quite fixed static sort of portal, you can literally ask proper questions, and it knows who you are, but anyway. But you know what I mean, and you can tie it in with that automation and stuff like that. People are doing this with Zapier, Make, and lots of other stuff. So I thought, why not jump on the bandwagon? But yeah, but there's been a lot of stuff over the few years. I know it's only episode 100. Um, I think a couple of things that jump out is Fermion, where they've got the WASM and WASI, which is the WebAssembly. And WebAssembly infrastructure. So it's essentially, if you don't know, there's a few episodes I've done about that, um, and it's WebAssembly that Blazor in the .NET world was born from. Steve Sanderson, I think, on that side, but WASM is not Microsoft, not anything. It's open. You can use lots of different languages, but the idea is, instead of having just JavaScript running in a browser, um, you can use. By the way, sorry about the pauses. I'm muting myself while I sort of cough over the microphone, which you don't need to know. You don't need to hear. So yeah, so the idea is you can use things like .NET or Rust or C++ or whatever language, and it's compiled applications running in your browser. So that's what Blazor does, and there's Blazor Server, Blazor WASM. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff, but that's been quite an interesting one. But Fermion took it one step further and said, well, those lightweight, because WASM is usually more lightweight than, say, even Docker, Docker containers and things like that. So you can run like WASM modules basically, like you would Docker containers. And if you don't know what Docker is, I've got a couple of podcasts over the years on that as well. And I think even Docker were back in episode 22. Crikey, that's got to be back 2021. So Docker WASM, I don't know what's happened with that. I'll have to revisit that. But that's quite an interesting move forward as well. There's, yeah, obviously all the AI stuff, needless to say, which is quite incredible, isn't it? So love it or hate it, but there's a lot of stuff going in the AI world, of course, and it's now people scrambling over how to actually make them, you know, uh, work for the businesses basically that they're in. So I think there's a lot of stuff there. Obviously, it's like a new generation of a new leap forward, isn't it? Again, love it or hate it. But anyway, there's quite a lot going on out there. 100 episodes. A couple of my recent favourite things are, again, AI agents. So they're not, like I say, I try to clear that is, it's not just trying to be clever chatbots. There's some real value there. Like I say, Salesforce have got Agentforce just recently announced, and they're going really big on that sort of stuff as well. But anyway, lots of ums and ers to explain all this. But I think AI agents, that's a big area that I'm really exploring. There's some really good platforms. There's a couple of really good open source platforms. There's a lot of these things cropping up, but one thing that I'm a bit wary of is you've got all these, well, and they're probably very good. It's not being mean to them, but you're putting all your trust in. I suppose you are somewhere, aren't you? Even on the big Azure and AWS or whatever, and Google Cloud compute platforms, but you're putting your trust somewhere. But the problem is some of these systems, these agentic systems, these platforms are cropping up, but you're putting everything into them. And then if they decide to go away or decide to close down, you're sort of like lost a little bit, aren't you? So that's why I've been looking at even things like in Twilio. Twilio has been around for quite a long time. They've got some really good AI agent sort of framework stuff going on there. But even that, you're sort of tied in to a platform. So a couple of things I'm working on at the moment is using AutoGen, which I think has got some Microsoft backing, but it's an open source platform for building AI agents. LangChain, LangGraph, LangSmith. There's a few things around LangChain, but these are where you can own the code. You can deploy it where you want to deploy it, and all sorts like that. Crew AI is another one, and even though, and that's the thing, there's always what is the shortest cut that I can do to get this thing working. And I understand that, time to market and all that sort of stuff is really good. But, like a lot of things, is, are you going to get bitten by the fact that you reach a limit that you can't do? It's like these sort of website builders and things like that. They can do a lot of really good stuff. Mobile app builders, they can do amazing stuff. They really can. But at some point, you're going to probably either lose your code, not lose your code, but you're going to get wrapped into a framework that you have to then continue. And if it disappears, you're stuck unless they give you the raw code. So there's all those sorts of things. So anything that's speedy sometimes, not always, comes with a bit of a cost. So that's why I've been looking at things, building AI agents with tools that are open, that you can own the code. If that disappears, you've still got the code. It doesn't matter. So I think that's something I'm working on, and I keep mentioning possibly about doing a course, but I'm building up really that knowledge and really some workable solutions, not just, hey, it'll go and recommend a holiday for you. Big deal. Use ChatGPT for that. But this is maybe with a little bit more depth to it. So AI agents, definitely. On the coding side, even though I still not really a proper developer, but I still .NET's my go-to. It just is. It has been for a long, obviously many years since it came out, and before that, it was all the Microsoft world, because that's where I worked. Not at Microsoft, but in the Microsoft ecosystem. So that's where it is. But one that's jumped out is Dino 2 specifically. If you've heard of Node.js, if you haven't, look it up. It is used. Node.js is still used by a lot of big companies. There's no doubt about it. It's there's a lot of companies out there, and it's essentially JavaScript server side. But the guy who created Node.js split some years ago and created something called Dino. And if you look at Dino, it's an anagram of Node. So there you go. But basically, he created Dino because he found that there was failings in Node.js, and it was too difficult to, uh, sort of fix at the time, I think, or something of that nature. But so Dino, the first iteration of Dino, I didn't really look at too much. You couldn't use a lot of the Node.js sort of stuff that you were used to, possibly. But then Bun came along, Bun, and that was like everything that Node.js wanted to be. And I must admit, it's still cool. There's no doubt about it. I'm not hitting Bun there. But Dino 2, that's been released recently, it's the same guy who originally created Node.js and the original Dino, but Dino 2, which is written in Rust, actually, of all things. So that's quite an interesting one. That's looking really interesting. It's got backward compatibility. If you want to use some of the Node.js modules, you can. You can compile to all the different platforms. There's a lot of goodness in there. It feels like it's really been thought through. So that's quite exciting at the moment. Blazor and things like that on the .NET side. .NET MAUI. I did a bit of Xamarin mobile development back in the day. So Xamarin was an open source iteration that used a .NET sort of compile aspect, but it essentially got merged into Microsoft and renamed MAUI, which is, I think, multi-user uh, some multi-user application, whatever it's called. I can't remember. I haven't got it in front of me. But MAUI is actually, it said its little glitches and problems here and there. But again, for building cross-platform mobile apps and desktop apps, because you can build Mac Catalyst apps that'll run on a Mac, on the M chips and the older ones, but also on Windows. So it covers a lot of different platforms. And I think even is it Samsung Tizen as well. So that's still, it's been around for a while, and not to mention vector databases as well because of all the AI stuff. So one thing I'm looking forward to is Postgres and the vector databases. I did an episode back in episode 88 where it stores vectors. So vectors are really just a sequence of numbers, but the numbers aren't just ASCII values of characters or anything. It uses AI models to actually group like sort of nearest neighbor type stuff together, but it generates it into numbers. So that's how it can work fast to go and look at like different bits. So if you say cat, it knows it's an animal. It's sort of in the same family. It isn't a dog, but so it's got all that nice logic. And if you do use something called RAG, which is retrieve augmented generation in AI, you generally your own data that you're providing to the AI is usually stored in something like vector databases. Postgres have got PG Vector, I think it is, and Microsoft SQL. I signed up; I haven't got access to it yet, but they've got vector support coming in Microsoft SQL as well. So that's obviously another interesting thing as well. But well, I've been rambling over 20 minutes. Episode 100. There you go. That is what I've got for this time. So if you're happy to keep listening, then fine, please do. I'm sure I'll keep just rambling into this microphone. But in the meantime, have a good rest of the week, weekend, whatever it is, and we will catch you in the next one.